Rodney James Alcala, over the course of several decades, would be linked to a series of violent crimes committed across multiple states. His case would eventually draw national attention, not just because of the nature of his crimes, but because of where he appeared in the public eye. In 1978, during the height of his criminal activity, Alcala was featured as a contestant on the television show called The Dating Game. Alcala's appearance on The Dating Game was nothing short of surreal, especially considering the context of his crimes. At the time, he was already a convicted rapist and had been out on parole for just a few months. Yet, his appearance on a lighthearted dating show would go unnoticed by the public and, most shockingly, by the producers of the show. The episode aired on September 13, 1978. In 1978, amid this escalating period of violence, Alcala made an appearance on national television that would forever etch his name into American pop culture. He was a contestant on The Dating Game, a popular TV show where a woman questioned 3 hidden bachelors and picked one for a date based on their answers. Alcala was bachelor number 1. The show's producers introduced him as a successful photographer with a darkroom big enough for 2. During the show, he delivered cheeky responses and flirtatious banter. His confidence, grin, and surface-level charm won over the bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw. She chose him, but behind the scenes, something felt off. After the show ended, Cheryl refused to go on the date. She later said he made her feel uneasy, that something about his energy creeped her out. Her instincts were right. By the time that episode aired on September 13, 1978, Rodney Alcala had already raped and killed multiple women. His appearance on The Dating Game would become one of the most chilling ironies in true crime history. A serial killer hiding in plain sight, smiling, joking, and being cheered by a live studio audience while carrying the weight of death behind his eyes. Rodney James Alcala was born on August 23, 1943, in San Antonio, Texas. His early life didn't hint at the horror he would unleash decades later, but there were signs of instability and emotional disturbance. When Alcala was around 8 years old, his father abandoned the family and moved back to Mexico, leaving his mother to raise him and his siblings alone. In his teenage years, Alcala moved with his family to Los Angeles. He seemed like a bright kid. He joined the U.S. Army in 1960 at age 17 and served as a clerk. But just a few years into his service, Alcala suffered what military psychiatrists described as a nervous breakdown. He was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and discharged on medical grounds. After his discharge, Alcala enrolled at UCLA and earned a degree in fine arts. Later, he would study film under the acclaimed director Roman Polanski at NYU. To the outside world, he appeared as a talented, artistic, and intelligent man with a promising future. But by the late 1960s, that promising exterior was unraveling. His first known act of violence was committed in 1968. Alcala lured an 8-year-old girl named Taylai Shapiro into his apartment in Los Angeles. A good Samaritan witnessed the abduction and called the police. When officers arrived, they found the girl unconscious and brutalized, but alive. Alcala had fled the scene. What followed was the beginning of his life as a fugitive. Alcala assumed a new identity as John Berger and fled across the country to New York, where he enrolled at the NYU School of the Arts. There, under his new name, he continued to cultivate his image as a charismatic, creative man, but the violent impulses never left him. Authorities added him to the FBI's most wanted list, but it wasn't until 1971 that he was caught, thanks to a pair of teenage girls who recognized him from a wanted poster. Alcala was sentenced to a brief prison term and was paroled just 2 years later. Then again, in 1974, he was arrested for assaulting another young girl. He was sent back to prison, but again released after serving only a short sentence. By then, Alcala had learned how to work the system. He knew how to play the role of a reformed man, using charm and intellect to convince parole boards that he was no longer a threat. But behind that polished image was a man growing more dangerous by the day. By the mid to late 1970s, Alcala was living in Los Angeles and posing as a photographer. He approached women in public spaces, at the beach, in parks, on the street, and asked if he could take their photos for his portfolio. Many agreed, believing he was legitimate. In reality, these photo sessions were the first step in his hunting process. Some of the women in the photos were later identified as missing persons. Others remain unidentified to this day. These images, which were hundreds of them, became a key part of the case. They suggested that Alcala's true victim count might be far higher than anyone realized. In July 1979, Alcala was arrested and charged with Robin Samso's murder. It marked the beginning of a long and complex legal battle that would stretch on for decades. But it also marked the end of a killing spree that had lasted for more than 10 years. When Rodney Alcala was linked by DNA to more murders in 2003, it marked a major breakthrough in the long pursuit of justice. These weren't just names on a list. They were young women with families, with lives and futures that were brutally stolen by a man who had walked free for far too long. The 4 victims were Jill Barkham, Georgia Wickstead, Charlotte Lamb, and Jill Parento. They had each been murdered in California during the late 1970s. Rodney Alcala wasn't just a one-off predator. He was a calculating serial killer who operated with disturbing precision, moving freely between states, charming his way into people's lives, and leaving devastation behind. In 2010, Alcala went on trial again, but this time not just for the murder of Robin Samso, but for the 4 additional victims tied to him by DNA. In February 2010, after a long and emotionally draining trial, Rodney Alcala was found guilty of 5 murders. The families of the victims finally had justice, even if it came decades too late. Yet, even as that trial ended, questions remained. What about the other women in his photographs? Who were they? Were there more victims? Investigators believed the answer was yes. Inside the storage locker seized in 1979, police had found hundreds of photographs. Many of them were sexually suggestive portraits of young women and teenage girls, and some even younger. A few had names written on the back. Many did not. Among the most chilling discoveries came in 2011. Alcala was charged with 2 more murders from New York State. One was Cornelia Crilly, a 23-year-old flight attendant raped and strangled in her Manhattan apartment in 1971, and Ellen Hover, a 23-year-old socialite who disappeared in 1977. Both murders had long been cold cases. But the connection to Alcala was finally made through his movements and preserved DNA evidence. In 2013, he pled guilty to both murders. By then, Rodney Alcala had been convicted in both California and New York, but the true number of his victims remains unknown. Some investigators believe he may have killed as many as 100 women and girls. He never showed genuine remorse. He never confessed to all of his crimes. Instead, he used his courtroom appearances to argue technicalities, challenge evidence, and maintain control over the narrative. Even his guilty pleas in New York were presented without emotion or acknowledgement of guilt. Rodney Alcala died on July 24, 2021, at the age of 77 years. Too many victims remain unidentified. Too many families still have unanswered questions. And too many of his photographs continue to haunt the walls of police departments, waiting for someone to recognize a missing loved one. Rodney Alcala's story is more than just the tale of a serial killer. It's a reflection of systemic failure, of how charm can be weaponized, of how institutions can be manipulated, and of how even national television can become an accidental stage for a murderer. His legacy is not in fame, but in warning. He reminds us that not every predator hides in the shadows. Some wear smiles, some carry cameras, some win game shows, and some, like Rodney Alcala, use the world's blind spots to carve out a path of horror that goes unnoticed until it's far too late.